Welcome. Thank you for coming out in the rain. Pleasure to be here. We are spiritual seekers here, I understand, and the fact that it's called the Namaste Center tells us something about the nature of the seekers. Namaste, you all know this, but I want to use it a little later. Namaste is a Sanskrit word meaning, and you have a nice definition here on the mission statement, but it's a little long. So the shorter definition is, that of God in me honors and acknowledges that of God in you. So we're talking about God inside of us. So that clearly puts us in the mystic side of theology, as opposed to the more conventional religions where God is out there somewhere to be accessed via some robed authority figure, which is okay. Just, and being of the mystic school, a bit of mystic wisdom is the popular bumper sticker, all is one, which I've always liked. It sounds very comforting. But you don't see it very much. So there are areas in your lives where I trust you don't talk about what you do on Sunday, or perhaps the paranormal practitioners that you go to, or perhaps you are a paranormal practitioner. There are places where you don't talk about things like that, right? You all have those places. So somehow things really aren't all as one as we might like. So what I'd like to do today is talk about some of these dualities. We have lots of things in our lives where in one domain we believe and act one way, and in another domain we believe and act in another way. And people are amazing in their ability to hold multiple views on the same subject, even conflicting views. And everybody tends to take their views, their paradigms, as reality. And this is true of scientists as it is of religious fanatics. When you threaten or challenge a view of reality, it is a threat to reality, and people tend to take it very seriously. We have all kinds of trouble for things like, for reasons of that sort. So what I'd like to do is talk about three dualities that I think we'll all be familiar with, and talk a little bit, very little bit, about how they really aren't all that dual, the mechanisms that make them non-dual. You still have to be careful of what you talk about in certain places, but at least you'll know how it works. So, there's three, and the first one I'd like to talk about is the local versus non-local view of the world. In the local view, we have materialist science, Newtonian science, where things are solid and here and in one place. And in the non-local view, we have a lot of people and phenomena that depend on things being everywhere all at once. And I include here the paranormal phenomena and the spiritual phenomena. Spiritual stuff comes next, so we'll just talk about the paranormal now. By paranormal, I mean many of the things that folks here do. Energy healing, psychics, remote viewing, medical intuitives, readers of all sorts. All of these people depend on accessing information at a distance. The healers exert influence at a distance, any distance, from if you're doing polarity, for example, they put your hand on you. Doing therapeutic touch, it's hands off. if you're doing distance healing or prayer, distance doesn't make any difference. So these kinds of phenomena are, well, they're common in some circles. They've always been part of human experience, but they're not allowed under the local, mainstream scientific view of the world. Another area that we have to be careful about maintaining our separate views is the secular or profane versus the spiritual, the old science versus religion issue. Profane means before the temple, not in the temple or not of the temple, outside the temple. And the sacred or spiritual refers to the spiritual, God, soul, and all that kind of thing. And they're viewed as separate things. You all have places in your lives, I'm sure, where you don't talk about your spiritual beliefs, and you certainly wouldn't, some of you anyway, I'm sure, would not suggest a spiritual sort of solution to a problem at work, say, or something like that. Is that fair? And this divide came from Descartes' deal. Descartes worked in lots of areas, math, who can forget Cartesian coordinates? But he worked in lots of areas, in other areas of math, in biology, astronomy, all kinds of things. He lived his whole life in fear of the Inquisition, that they would come and take him away for some heresy. So Descartes proposed that the transcendent mind is separate from and not really related to the material body. And that's what allowed the church to go off, and they divided up the territory. And the church took the transcendent mind, the soul, and all that kind of stuff, and science got the material body. And they've been pretty good for the last 400 years or so about maintaining that division. Science doesn't do spiritual stuff, and religion doesn't do science very often, once in a while. And finally, the third division is the division between logic and reason and masculine values, patriarchy, and the feminine feeling, intuitive side of things. This is a patriarchal culture, and so the male attributes, stereotypical male attributes, are valued more than the mere female attributes. So reason and logic is better than feeling, right? No, but that's the model. And that's certainly where I came from. I mean, I grew up with a third-generation Scottish mother and an engineer father from a family of engineers, and we did not do feelings. This is not something that one does. So it was a big surprise to me when I was doing this work. I started out trying to explain how energy healing works, and it became apparent that it's feelings. Sorry guys, it's feelings. So, I'd like to talk a little bit about how that works. Actually, what I want to talk about is mechanisms that show us that these dualities are artificial. They're not really different. So I began with the sort of the local and non-local. And science, Newtonian science, up until the end of the 19th century was thoroughly local. It was material. If it's not material, it's not real. Beginning in 1900 and continuing to the present, but up to 1926, quantum mechanics was developed. And quantum mechanics rubbed the collective nose of physicists in the non-local. Quantum mechanics describes matter in terms of this wave domain, specifically a wave function. And it turns out that everything that happens is described by this wave function. And these wave functions are very strange. The geometry of them tells us that for things with little mass, they are distributed across space and even across time. They are decidedly non-local. Worse than that, they are probabilistic. As physics was used to calculating, you know, you shoot a cannonball, it will come out, land exactly here. Well, in quantum mechanics, you can't do that. If you do the calculation and you solve for the wave function, you get this wave that is a probability distribution. 80% of the time it's going to show up here, and 20% here, and very disturbing to the physicists. Einstein said God doesn't play dice with the universe. He was wrong. God does play. So this wave function is non-local. It is non-temporal, and all possibilities exist in this wave function. Everything that could possibly happen to this electron or whatever it is are carried in this wave function. But when we see an electron, it's only here. It's only in one place. So they say the wave function collapses. And all of those possibilities go away and you get one specific instance. That also disturbs physicists. They can't tell why the wave function collapses. So, non-locality is normal. It's okay. Electrons, being non-local, don't account for medical intuitives or energy healing, but at least we've introduced non-locality into science. And very early on, they recognized that the way the quantum people talked about reality sounded a lot like the Buddhists. Buddhists describe material reality as Maya, illusion. And in quantum mechanics, they don't call material reality illusion, but it is only one possibility out of an infinite number that exists in the quantum field. The field is reality, and this is a very small projection. So, locality and non-locality are part of the same thing. It's okay. There isn't really a distinction between them. They are two sides of the same coin. Now that idea has not permeated physics much, even though we're very aware of it. There's still a lot of Newtonian physicists out there. All right. The secular and the profane. Oh no, the secular and the spiritual. Descartes made the deal, and they have been rigorously separated. They're very different things. You do spiritual things in church on Sundays, and the rest of the week you do secular things, and they're not the same at all in most places. So how does this, how do they come together? Well, the reason they come together is that we are God, put it very simply. And the mechanism of that is that Carl Pribram, a brain researcher, proposed that we think not in neurons, but we think in holograms. He calls it the holonomic brain theory. And he proposed that when we perceive things, we convert the information into holograms, waves, and we carry those waves in our synapses. The connections between neurons, there's a little voltage in there, and it oscillates, and a patch of synapses oscillates coherently to carry a hologram. Very interesting. It's interesting because the quantum field is a hologram. The form of the quantum equations is the same form that Dennis Gabor used to calculate holograms. Fourier transform is the bit of math. So our internal stuff is of the same form as the quantum field. The relationship of the stuff inside our brain to what we see outside is the same as the relationship between what we see outside and the quantum field. That's interesting. But it's not quite enough, because the stuff in our brain is big, it's local. The quantum field is distributed. So we need a way to connect our holograms in our head to the field. And for that, the folks at the University of Arizona have proposed that microtubes, I won't talk about what microtubes are, but you've all seen pictures. Nobody ever knows what microtubes are. But everybody, when the cell divides, this picture of the chromosome being pulled apart, the little black things and the little stringy things, those are all microtubes. Microtubes are quantum computers. They are the organs of consciousness. So they oscillate between this quantum distributed state and a collapsed material state. They go back and forth. That's from the University of Arizona. It's my proposal that the microtubes in the neurons take our macro scale holograms and transfer them to and from the field. Now we're getting someplace. Now our thoughts, feelings really, thoughts are in the quantum field. And just like in the case of the electron, it's not that the field is a shadow following what's happening here. It's the other way around. Our stuff is happening in the field. We are thinking and feeling in the field, and we are a projection of one tiny possibility out of all the possibilities that are happening in the field. What do you think? Our thoughts and feelings have no mass. It's just information, living and breathing information, but just information. That means that our stuff is distributed across space and time. It is everywhere, which is why all the paranormal stuff works. You can connect to stuff in the field, that's how your normal memory works. You can connect to other people's stuff. So you can do readings on people. Medical intuitives do it all the time. Turns out our health is also a quantum process carried by light, biophotons, which is carried again in the microtubes. So our health is in the field, which is why you can do healing or, curses at a distance. Because everybody's health is everywhere. So that's us, and that's the paranormal phenomena. But what that means is that the field is thought. These wave functions are thought and feeling. Living, breathing, thinking. Everything thinks like that, dogs and cats and horseshoe crabs and everything. And because it's distributed across space and time, that means that it's going to be there, these thoughts, feelings stuff is going to be there before our material bodies appear, while we're living, now, and it will continue to be there after our material bodies go away. What does that sound like? Soul. Interesting thing, I think, for me anyway, is that the soul is in heaven. That's where souls live, right? Well, it's the quantum field. They're there across all space and time. But we're there now. This isn't someplace you have to go. There's no, judgment or gate or test you have to pass. You're there. This is it. This is as good as it gets. Think about that for a couple. So if the field is thought, it can think at lower levels. Why not think at higher levels? People have always recognized larger entities, presences that they can be aware of and communicate with, and they call these God, or spirits, or things like that. Intelligences larger, on a larger scale than ours, in the field, are God. It's just a bigger scale than us. It's the same as us, though. So what does that mean? The field is God. The field is me and you and your brother-in-law and the horseshoe crabs and all that. And it was just actually quite recently that I realized that the intelligence of the field is also electrons. Electrons are dumber than dirt. I mean, they're just... But they are as much an expression of the field as you and I, or Willie Nelson, or anybody. Which I find interesting. Now, I've used the term wave function, and I don't think I said there's a wave function for electrons. Well, there's a wave, you can think of as a wave function for me. My thought and feeling would be described, if we could calculate it, as a wave function. And the intelligences above me would be wave functions, different frequencies and all, but wave functions. And here's an interesting tidbit about quantum mechanics. It's very different from Newtonian physics. In Newtonian physics, if you have three balls bouncing around a pool table and you want to describe how they move, you would write three equations, if you were into that sort of thing. In quantum mechanics, if you have three electrons bouncing around a pool table, you would only write one wave function. The rule in quantum mechanics is that anything that interacts is included in the same wave function. Which is why physicists can only solve some wave functions, but only for isolated electrons. They can't even solve a wave function for a single atom. It's too complicated because everything is in the same equation. But the principle is that there's only one wave function. If these wave functions are intelligence and feeling and such, then there's only one. It's all God. What people have always called God. There's only one. There's only one intelligence, and it is everything. The nature of holograms is that you can have lots of individual things within the same hologram, property of waves. So we can all be unique, but we are all of the one intelligence, the one thing that people have always called God. So, you and I are not secular beings. We are God. We are as much an expression of God as anything in the universe. That's all there is. There is nothing else. The distinction between secular and the sacred is goofy. All right. So, we come now to the feeling and logic issue. And I grew up, like I assume many of you did, getting patted on the head for being clever and intellectual and doing things, smart things, and not doing feelings. But when I was when I first started doing this work, I was trying to explain how energy healing works. And I was looking at influence. That is, someone sitting and holding a healing image, whether you're putting your hands on someone or thinking about someone a long ways away, and influencing the outcome of their health. How does that work? What makes that go? Is it thought? Is it conscious thought? Well, no. When I took therapeutic touch training, I remember we did this exercise. We were supposed to do 3 passes over the back of our partner. And I'm the only guy in the class. These are all long-time intuitive women. They're just amazing. And I'm worried. Am I doing this? And so then I realized after the second pass, oh, I'm not centered. I'm not. So I stopped and she said, when I got done, she said, boy, those first 2 passes felt really bad. But the third pass felt really nice. So conscious thought does not work very well. Some other things that I thought about, The Secret. Anybody familiar with The Secret? They sell millions and millions of copies of this. And The Secret tells us that all you have to do is think about this stuff, for a couple, 3 days, and bada boom, bada bing, there it is. The big house, the trophy spouse. Does this work? They've sold millions of copies. I'm sure people have pored over these things. The McMansions are all still vacant. The people getting married, in the Transylvania Times look like regular folks. There's no supermodels marrying local boys. Conscious thought is not where it's at. So what is it? It's feelings. The mother who picks up the car off of her child, the Jansenist miracles in 17th century Paris, all of this stuff involves strong feeling, even memory, even long-term memory, which is in the field. It's never been located in the brain. It's in the field. But to put something in the long-term memory, we have to have some feeling, some emotional charge with it. If we have a real strong emotional charge, it is what we call trauma, good or bad. And trauma, by definition, is something that we can instantly recall in great detail for years and years after. Why does that happen? Because we have a strong field. So the medium of our connection to the field and the medium of our influence and our power, our godlike powers, the very powers that God has of creation and knowing and all this stuff, are driven by feeling. I'm sorry to say. And, there's some research that shows that our behavior is all driven by feelings. Do the brain scans, and you're going to do something, you're going to pick up a pencil. The emotional centers become active, the motion planning centers become active, and then the reasoning centers become active. Oh, I need a pencil. That's the afterthought. Our feelings are driven, our actions are driven by feelings. Witness the nominally rational, powerful, intelligent men usually who do really stupid things. We have, the former governor in a state nearby, perhaps you call it. So, it is, all of this stuff is driven by feelings. If there is any discrepancy between our inner beliefs and feelings and our conscious thought, the feelings always win. Brother Lawrence said we should live a life of constant prayer, which I never understood. How do you do that? You bump into things. But we do all the time. Our feelings are out there all the time. That is our connection to the greater cosmos. We are always connected. We are always out there stirring the pot with whatever our inner state is. We are always in a state of prayer. And it is our innermost feelings, which includes, the good stuff, the stuff we're happy with, and the stuff we're not so happy with. Shadow, you familiar with the term shadow? The stuff you've buried because it's not acceptable for one reason or another. Those are all feelings, and those are what's out there. So, feeling work, inner work, is probably the most important spiritual practice there is. Which, you can just clear the whole room by saying things like that, depending on the group. So, we are one. We are one in the quantum field. We are not one here. Interesting thing about God, if it is a quantum God, it is probabilistic, which means that everything that can happen does happen in some proportion. The influence that we can exert through prayer or intent or collective intent or whatever is not to make an outcome be this way. The best we can do is to move the probability curve. There will always be evil. And the Buddhists said that. Good and evil are just two sides of the same coin. There will always be evil. There will always be pain and suffering. And goodness and all that kind of good stuff. You can't get rid of it because the universe and human behavior is probabilistic. God is not Zeus throwing thunderbolts. God is subtle. And what I usually like to say is that we are not isolated material beings stumbling through life. We are projections of the non-material God in the material world. When I was thinking about this talk last night, I realized it would be better if I said it the other way around. That statement was from the point of view of the material us. But suppose I said it from the other side. The non-material parts of us, our thoughts, feelings, health, and all, is God, is what people have always recognized as God. We are simply a collapse of the wave function. It happens about 10 times a second, actually. But the part of us that is non-material is the big wave function in the sky. It is God. We are God. Do you feel better?
Pardon me. So if I were to distill what you're saying is that all of humankind and maybe all of plant kind and animal kind thoughts, feelings have contributed to that which we call God. And we're still contributing to
Yes.
that by our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. And so we've created all of this. I think Charles Fillmore in Unity called this race consciousness, which is the thoughts, feelings, and consciousness of everybody, which we then project as God, and then pray to this being in the sky, which we've created. So
yes, I think that's absolutely true. I'd put it the other way.
Okay.
That electrons and amoebas and horseshoe crabs and your brother-in-law and are expressions of God. And as God grows, and God does grow, which is an interesting concept if it is non-temporal, if this stuff is non-temporal, then how can it change over time? It's kind of like bent space.
Yeah.
But we are an expression of God. It's not that we are creating God.
Yeah.
I hate to say, God created us.
Maybe it's a both and.
But yes, we are an ongoing contributor
Yes.
to the ongoing creation of the universe, of God. Yes, exactly like that. So, namaste is literally true. I think the Taoists got it right. That of God in me, I mean, it is, and so we can acknowledge that part of each of us, even if you're an idiot. Yes, being whole does not require being, you can be neurotic and still be whole. It's okay. So, it is literally true. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.